The first evolutionary force we need to consider is mutation. In some ways, mutation is the most basic and fundamental force of evolutionary change. Mutation is the source of all new biological variation. Broadly speaking, mutation refers to the creation of new variation from one generation to the next. Again, we'll most commonly think about mutation in the context of changes to our DNA from one generation to the next. Mutations which actually change the basic structure of our DNA and change that coding platform upon which life is developed further. But let's consider an example of how mutation works in practice. The basic operation of mutation is very simple. You can imagine some basic starting point, in this case, our blue disk right here. With each subsequent generation, that disk is going to replicate itself into the next generation. But it's not always going to replicate itself perfectly. In some cases, there might be novel mutations which develop. In this example here, we see that in one instance, it's replicated itself perfectly. In another instance, we've added a new property. In this case, a small red disk housed internally. And we can imagine this property moving forward across generations. Again, with each generation producing new kinds of variants and new kinds of variation. Carry this out to the end, and even within, in this case, a very limited example with a few small changes, we see a lot of new properties have developed. A lot of new variation has developed within this sample. So mutation is the basic source of new variation. And in this case, in just, again, our 4 generations, we've added emergent properties in the case of new kinds of features. Here we see the internal properties. Here we see changes to the external properties. Here we see changes to basically the addition of a new feature altogether. And we can imagine this again in thinking about the fossil record as the development of new properties within fossil lineages as well. An important thing to keep in mind about mutation is that mutation occurs all the time across all generations. The basic rate of human mutation is generally quite low. Each individual contains only maybe a few dozen or perhaps 100 new mutations at the genetic level from their parents. However, the overall force of mutation can be quite strong if we consider the scale of the effect. Even if most mutations have essentially no effect, and each individual houses only a few new mutations, if you have a population of 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000 or even 1,000,000,000 people, suddenly the amount of variation being produced each new generation is huge. So while we might not expect mutation to generate much within a single lineage over a short period of time, the fact that populations are large and extend across many generations gives mutation the chance to create huge amounts of variation for evolution to act upon.